February 8, 1998, 19-year-old mother Fiona Sinnott left Butler's pub in Broadway, County Wexford. Her ex-boyfriend and father of her child, Sean Carroll, claimed he walked Fiona home, but Fiona was never seen again. When Garda arrived at her rented home, they found it completely cleaned out, but Fiona hadn't packed up and left. Someone had erased every trace of her. A neighbor down the road recalled hearing terrible screaming that night. Yet, despite reported sightings, whispers of violence and lingering suspicions, no body has ever been found. So what really happened to Fiona Sinnott, and who made sure she disappeared without a trace? Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us, the channel where we dive deep into the most chilling and mysterious cold cases. If this interests you, hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments to help us grow. On a warm July afternoon, a teenage girl walks home, greeting her neighbors, unaware she'll never be seen alive again. Within hours, she's reported missing. By morning, her case dominates headlines, linked to a disturbing pattern of vanished women, some never found, others discovered months later in remote locations. Fear spreads across Ireland. The Vanishing Triangle is born. And so too is a dedicated task force, Operation Trace, tracing, reviewing, and collating evidence. The team was initially assigned to investigate the disappearances of 6 young women: Annie McCarrick, an American student who vanished in March 1993, Jojo Dollard, last seen hitchhiking in November 1995, Fiona Pender, a heavily pregnant woman who disappeared in August 1996, Ciara Breen, a teenager who left home one night in February 1997 and never returned, Fiona Sinnott, a young mother who vanished in February 1998, and Deirdre Jacob, last seen near her home in July 1998. But as the investigation deepened, more cases emerged. Women who had been abducted and murdered, their bodies later discovered in remote locations. These are their stories. This series is based on retired Irish detective Alan Bailey's book, Missing Presumed, featuring first-hand Garda accounts and comprehensive evidence, bringing you the most in-depth look at Ireland's most chilling unsolved cases.
He said to me, he said to me that he wasn't going to leave this and he's just going to really, really shit started. Said to me someone like, "So I'm of course he is. Kitty, why like? Because it just isn't like me, you know." She'd be like, "Joey, like, my pitch, Joey, like, you better look at the, because they're not." I tried, like, before this, like, sorry, not going back to again.
Fiona Sinnott was 19 years old, a fiercely independent young woman determined to build a life for herself and her baby daughter. After ending a tumultuous relationship with the father of her child, she took a bold step, choosing to live alone in a rented house in the quiet village of Broadway, County Wexford, just 10 miles from her family home. She kept in touch with her parents and siblings, but days would often pass before they heard from her. A delay in contact was not unusual, but this time, 10 days would come and go, and still, there was no sign of Fiona. By the time her family reported her missing to the Gardaí, a disturbing discovery had already been made. Her rented home in Ballyhitt had been scrubbed clean. Someone had meticulously stripped away the traces of her existence. A local passerby later recalled something chilling. On one particular day, more than a dozen black refuse sacks were lined up for collection outside her house. Fiona was many things: a devoted mother, a fighter, but a housekeeper, not so much. A deep clean of that magnitude, that wasn't like Fiona. It was as if someone had been erasing her. The last confirmed sighting of Fiona was on the 9th of February 1998, almost a year to the day after a young Irish woman, Ciara Breen, vanished without a trace. As Gardaí began their investigation, they quickly encountered an unsettling pattern. Those closest to the main person of interest were reluctant to talk. They were afraid of him. Fiona knew that fear all too well. For years, she had endured a relationship marred by brutal violence. He was 10 years older, controlling, a man whose rage left her bruised and broken, physically and emotionally. Time and again, Gardaí were called to their shared homes. Time and again, Fiona refused to press charges. She believed his promises. It won't happen again. She blamed herself, convinced by his twisted logic. I only hurt you because I love you. It's a cycle that many victims never escape. But Fiona tried. Wexford General Hospital's records tell the story of what Fiona endured. Bruises, bite marks, broken bones, injuries that whispered of horrors she never fully voiced. Then there were the witnesses. A neighbor found her one night, sobbing on the roadside, discarded like trash. Her partner had thrown her out of their mobile home, drunk and violent, wielding a knife. When Garda arrived, he was there, drunk, defiant, cowering inside the home he had turned into a prison. He sneered at the officers, refusing to let Fiona back in. It's my house. She's not welcome. That night, she found shelter with a friend, but she was still far from safe. She confided in friends, revealing the true depths of his cruelty. She told them of the night he assaulted her, a night so vile it made even hardened detectives recoil in horror. She was heavily pregnant when it happened, vulnerable, defenseless. The attack was sickening, prolonged, relentless. Detective Alan Bailey would later say that, even if only half of what she described was true, her attacker should have never been allowed to walk free again. But she never reported it. He still had a hold on her. The violence escalated. Each attack is worse than the last. And then, Fiona made her decision. She would leave, for good, a fresh start, a new home, a life free from his grip. But she never got the chance. Her abuser's reputation was no secret. His family and friends knew. They saw the bruises and they heard the whispered stories. Yet they stayed silent. They tolerated him, defended him. Fiona Sinnott vanished that February night. No body has ever been found. And the man at the center of it all, he still walks free. Sunday, February 8th, 1998. 19-year-old Fiona Sinnott was in her local pub, Butler's, in the village of Broadway, County Wexford. It was a familiar place, a refuge of sorts, where she could go share drinks and laughter with friends, momentarily escaping the shadows of her past. That night, she sat with three of her closest friends. They reminisced about the previous Friday, a night out at Tusker House Hotel in Rosslare. They had travelled to the club together, packed into a minibus. But Fiona hadn't come back with them. Her 11-month-old daughter, Emma, was spending the weekend with her paternal grandparents. Despite her failed relationship with Emma's father, Fiona made sure her daughter maintained a bond with his family. She was trying to move on, trying to rebuild. Then, he walked in. Sean Carroll, Fiona's former partner, the father of her child. He was 10 years older. A man with a reputation, a temper, and a grip that Fiona had struggled to break free from. Her friends later recalled the moment. Fiona looked surprised to see him. She did not greet him. Carroll made no attempt to approach her either. Instead, he sat at the bar, drinking alone, watching, waiting. Fiona, however, wasn't herself that night. Her friends noticed the discomfort. "Are you okay?" they asked. Fiona winced again, pressing a hand to her upper chest and arm. She gave no explanation. She refused to discuss it. The cause of her pain remains a mystery. At some point in the night, she made a brief phone call to her brother, Seamus. "Come down for a drink," she invited him. But Seamus had just returned from work. He was tired. He declined. Seamus may have later regretted that decision. Detective Alan Bailey, reviewing the reports years later, would express his grim certainty. When Fiona had made the choice to break free, to start afresh, she had sealed her own fate. It was only a matter of when, not if, her past would catch up to her. At closing time, Fiona left the pub alone. She turned back, waved goodnight to her friends. They waved back. Not one of them knew it would be the last time they'd ever see her alive again. As she walked away, Sean Carroll followed. Witnesses found this odd. The two had barely spoken all night. Then came the argument. A customer lingering near the porch later told Garda that he heard voices, tense, angry, coming from outside the pub. Fiona had already left, but Carroll had followed. Butler's pub was only a quarter of a mile from Fiona's rented house, a short, familiar walk, but she never made it home. A passing motorist later told investigators that he saw a couple arguing near the entrance to a quarry shortly after closing time. The woman looked distressed. And then, another witness. Someone living just off that road reported hearing a scream. A woman, piercing the stillness of the night. The location? Mill Pond Cross. Exactly where Fiona would have been walking. Fiona Sinnott vanished that night. No one has ever seen her again. No body, no answers. Wednesday, February 18th, 1998. 10 days had passed since anyone had seen or heard from Fiona Sinnott. Her father, Patrick Sinnott, walked into the Kilmore Quay Garda station and spoke to the local officer, Jim Sullivan. "My daughter is missing." The words hung in the air. Fiona had vanished without a trace. Garda Sullivan immediately launched a full missing persons investigation. Yes, Fiona had disappeared before. Briefly, she had fled a few times in the past, staying with friends in Cork, trying to escape the violence that had shadowed her life. But this was different. She hadn't contacted her family, her siblings, or her friends. She hadn't even reached out about something far too important for her to ignore, her sister Diane's 21st birthday. Fiona had planned to travel with her family to Waterford to pick out a gift. And then there was Emma. Her baby daughter was about to turn 1. Fiona had been excited, making plans, arranging celebrations. There was no way she would have willingly missed that day. The silence was deafening. Something was wrong. The last confirmed sighting of Fiona was at Butler's pub the night of February 8th. Witnesses recalled seeing Sean Carroll, her former partner, following her out. Questioned by Gardaí, Carroll gave his version of events. He claimed that after leaving the pub, he walked Fiona home to Ballyhitt. She had complained about feeling unwell, chest pains, pain in her arm. He said she had gone straight to bed, while he slept on the couch downstairs. Then came his final account of that morning. Monday, February 9th, at 9 a.m., he said he went into Fiona's bedroom. She was awake but still in pain. She told him she planned to see her doctor but had no money, so he gave her £3, and then he left. His mother, he claimed, was waiting outside in the car. She had driven him home to Codstown, where Emma was staying. The Carroll family had made no effort to check on Fiona in the days that followed. They did not contact her. They did not ask when she planned to return her daughter. For 9 days, they carried on as if nothing had happened. When news of Fiona's disappearance hit the media, the Carroll family remained silent. They did not join the search efforts. They did not make public appeals. In the years that followed, they would limit Fiona's parents' involvement in their granddaughter's life. Gardaí checked everywhere. Bridgetown, Wexford General Hospital, other local surgeries. Fiona had not visited a single one. There was no evidence she had ever tried to hitch a lift that morning. No sightings, no trace, nothing. Then came the most chilling discovery of all. Gardaí entered Fiona's home. They expected to find signs of a young mother living there, clothes, baby toys, personal items. Instead, they found nothing. No clothes, no personal belongings, no trace that Fiona or her daughter had ever lived there. The house had been emptied. The landlord later stated that, on previous visits, Fiona's home had been cluttered, full of bits and pieces. But now, it was as if someone had erased her, as if Fiona Sinnott had never come home. And the one person who last saw her alive, the man who once claimed to love her, walked away without looking back. As news of Fiona Sinnott's disappearance spread, the Gardaí were approached by a local farmer, Eamon Lawler. He had something disturbing to report. In the days before Fiona's disappearance made headlines, he had been out in his fields, checking on his cattle. That's when he noticed them. Black refuse sacks, dumped in a ditch. Illegal dumping wasn't uncommon for him. Thinking nothing of it, Eamon set fire to the bags, completely destroying their contents. But before lighting the match, he had opened one, just to see if there was anything inside that could identify who had left them. What he found made his blood run cold. Medicine containers, letters, paperwork, all of it bore one name: Fiona Sinnott, George's Street in Wexford. The address did not match Fiona's last known home in Ballyhitt, but Garda knew it well. It was where Fiona had lived with her former partner before she left him. Whatever was in those bags, whatever trace of Fiona's life had been discarded there, was gone forever. This is the devastating consequence of a delayed missing person report. This wasn't just a murder, it was an erasure. Someone wasn't content with ending Fiona's life. They wanted to wipe away all proof that she ever existed. Was this deliberate misdirection? Was her killer trying to suggest that she had left of her own accord, abandoning her child, vanishing into the night? The Gardaí weren't buying it. Then, another lead emerged. On the Friday night before her disappearance, Fiona had met an English truck driver at the Tusker House Hotel. He had parked his lorry overnight, waiting to catch the first ferry out of Rosslare. Fiona had spent the night with him in the cab of his truck, but someone had seen them. Someone had not been happy. A former partner had tracked her down. He stood outside, pounding on the door, shouting her name, ordering her to come out. Inside the cab, Fiona shrank back in fear. She refused to leave, and perhaps for the first time, the man who had terrorized her for years found himself powerless. He was alone. His usual henchmen weren't with him that night, and he knew better than to pick a fight with the truck driver. So with no other choice, he had walked away. Humiliated. That loss of control, that loss of face, may have been the breaking point. Could Fiona have left Ireland? One man suggested she had. A person of interest in the case theorized that she might have run off to England, possibly with the truck driver. But that would mean someone had driven a 40-foot lorry down the narrow roads of Ballyhitt loaded with all of Fiona's belongings, without a single person seeing it. It seemed unlikely. But nonetheless, the Gardaí had to rule it out. Authorities, with the help of British police, traced the truck driver, Andrew Murray, and contacted him. He had nothing to hide. He returned to Ireland voluntarily to meet with detectives. He confirmed that he had spent the night with Fiona. The following morning, at her request, he dropped her off in Kilrain village just outside Rosslare. He hadn't seen or heard from her since. His alibi was airtight. He had spent the past few weeks driving across the continent with documented proof of his whereabouts. And he told the Gardaí one more thing. Fiona had been terrified the night her ex came banging on the door of his truck. She had looked at him with pure fear in her eyes. Then another story began to circulate. A whispered rumor that Fiona's body had been hidden in a quarry, that a day or two later 3 men had returned with a blue van, that they had weighed the body down with chains and dumped her in a lake that lay just a short distance from where Fiona was last seen alive, a lake known as Our Lady's Island Lake. Gardaí partially drained the lake. Divers searched it. They searched other lakes in the area as well. They found nothing. Just like before, just like the other missing women, no trace, no body. From the very beginning, one name loomed over the investigation into Fiona Sinnott's disappearance. A man well known to her. A man well known to Gardaí, but not just for his connection to Fiona. This man, the main suspect, was already on the radar of the Wexford Garda drug unit, a low-level dealer, part of a small, insular gang involved in the sale and use of cannabis. In June 1998, 4 months after Fiona vanished, the entire gang was arrested, but not for murder, for drugs. They all remained silent. Detectives attempted to question these men in relation to Fiona's disappearance, but were met with further silence. Nothing to say, they'd exclaim. They weren't talking, and they weren't charged. Over the years, Gardaí conducted extensive searches across Wexford and beyond. The rumours still swirled. Whispers of local youths helping to dispose of Fiona's body. Speculation over burial sites, lakes, quarries. But one detail remained constant: the identity of the man accused of killing her. Then, a crack in the silence. Garda learned that a local man, one of only 3 people who allegedly knew where Fiona's body was hidden, was struggling to live with the truth. He feared the suspect. He had been pressured into moving Fiona's body. Now, guilt was consuming him. Each time a new appeal for information was broadcast, the weight of his secret grew heavier. A friend encouraged him, call the Garda, give them the location anonymously, but he refused. He told the friend that only the 3 of them knew the location. It would be signing my death warrant. In 2001, the one man who might have led investigators to Fiona's body was dead. Aged just 35, he died of a drug overdose. Accidental or something else? The truth died with him. In another twist, a deathbed confession. A local man, burdened by years of fear, finally spoke. He had been told long ago that Fiona's body was buried in a specific field, but he had been too afraid to come forward. Now, with death approaching, he unburdened his soul. Garda searched the location, nothing. Yet for the man who had lived with this secret, his final days were spent in peace. By 2005, Fiona had been missing 7 years. Legally, she could now be classified as deceased. And with that milestone came a shift in the case. Detective Mark Kerrigan had spent years working on Operation Trace, the national task force investigating Ireland's missing women. When he took over the Wexford Kilkenny division, he dug into the case files, and what he found shocked him. Operation Trace had made clear recommendations for actions against certain suspects in Fiona's case, but they had never been followed up. That changed immediately. In June 2005, an incident room coordinator was dispatched to Wexford. The case was reopened, and on the 16th of September 2005, Garda made their move. In a carefully orchestrated operation, 6 people were arrested in connection with Fiona's disappearance. 3 men, 3 women, ages ranging from 30 to 60. Some were closely related. Some were suspected of knowing far more than they had ever admitted. For the first time, Garda announced this was now a full murder investigation. All 6 suspects were released without charge. The very next morning, Fiona's former partner's first cousin, Robert Pask, walked into a Garda station. He wanted to report a threat. He said that at 7 a.m. on September 17th, Sean Carroll had turned up at his home, and he had a message for him. "You're a dead man." He didn't say he would do it himself. Instead, he told Pask, "I know someone who will. Lads are on the way over." Fearing for his life, Pask left his home. 2 weeks later, on September 30th, Carroll was arrested for making criminal threats. He denied everything, but the case went to trial. On July 2006, the judge ruled against him. Calling the threat of the utmost seriousness, he sentenced Carroll to 3 months in prison. Carroll appealed, and in December 2007, his sentence was overturned. Instead, he was simply bound to keep the peace for 2 years, a slap on the wrist. The searches for Fiona's body continued. More tips, more excavations, but still no trace, no body, and no justice. Fiona Sinnott's name faded from the headlines, but in the fields and lakes of Wexford, her secret burial place remains. In September 2008, on the 10th anniversary of her disappearance, Fiona's loved ones gathered for a special ceremony at Our Lady's Cemetery, just a short distance from where she was last seen alive. A plaque had been placed in the cemetery wall the day before, in Fiona's memory, but on the morning of the ceremony, it was gone. Stolen. This was no accident. Locals knew the truth. This was deliberate. This was personal. This was a final act of cruelty, an attempt to erase Fiona's existence, and those closest to her knew exactly who was behind it, her murderer or someone acting on his behalf. Those who knew Fiona, who knew her love for her daughter, her family, her home, knew one thing with absolute certainty. She did not leave of her own free will. She did not run away. She was taken. In 2004, Fiona's father, Pat Sinnott, died without ever knowing the truth. Some say it was a broken heart that killed him. He spent his final years waiting for an answer that never came. And he was not the only one. In 2017, Fiona's sister, Caroline, passed away at just 47 years old. She too went to her grave never finding her beloved sister. On December 7th, 2017, the Irish Sun broke a startling revelation. The chief suspect in the disappearance and murder of Fiona Sinnott had long since left the jurisdiction. The newspaper reported that the man at the center of the investigation was once again on the move. For some time, he had been residing in both the UK and Spain. However, in a calculated effort to evade authorities, he had suddenly vanished, bolting from his known locations in what appeared to be a deliberate attempt to obstruct any future extradition efforts. Now Gardaí have uncovered fresh intelligence. The suspect has relocated once again, this time to yet another country, in what they believe to be a cunning maneuver designed to further complicate any attempts to bring him to justice. No matter how much her killer tried to erase Fiona, they could never erase her memory. Not from her family, not from her friends, and most of all, not from her daughter, Emma, who grew up with questions that no one could answer. Who still wonders, where is my mother? Fiona Sinnott is still missing. Her body has never been found. Her killer still walks free, and somewhere, someone still knows the truth. Thank you for listening to Fiona's story. Please feel free to leave your own comments, thoughts, and theories down below, and we'll see you next time.